Hello friends, my name is Jess and welcome back to my channel, Books Past Bedtime. Today I'm going to be updating you on my reading stats so far for 2022. I did this video for last quarter and I'm planning to do it for the next 2 quarters of the year. If you watch my wrap-ups every month, you know that I track a lot of things in regards to the books that I read, so I have a lot of stats to share, and I don't ever share like overview stats except for every quarter of the year, so that's what we're doing in this video. I don't have my spreadsheet separated into quarters. This is basically like an updated stats video, and it's going to be looking at everything that I've read for the first half of the year. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope you enjoy looking at stats as much as I do. I love when other people do these types of videos. I just think they're so fun. I love numbers and reading, and I don't know. I just think it's so interesting, so hopefully you do too. And let's just hop right into my reading stats so far for 2022. So I haven't mentioned this in previous videos, but I have read 101 things so far in 2022, which is perfect and means that I am 51% of the way through my reading goal for 2022, which is set at 200 books. If I manage to achieve reading 200 books this year, this will be my all-time best reading year, which would be awesome if I could hit that, and I am on track, so I'm feeling good about that. Broken down a little bit more, of those 101 books I've read so far this year, that is equivalent to 32,650 pages read total, which is insane to think about. I have listened to 321 hours of audiobooks. This is not real time. It is like total length of the audiobook. I don't know exactly how much real time I've spent listening to audiobooks, but you can probably divide this by 2.5, and that's close to probably the real time that I've listened to audiobooks so far this year. The books acquired and library checkouts I have not been keeping up with, so those 2 stats are not accurate, but of course you can see here the books that I have read, and 7 of the books that I read this year have been rereads. Those are the 4 Heartstopper volumes that I reread prior to this year, and then I've also reread Unhinged, Intoxicating, and Moth, which are all 3 Kindle Unlimited romances that I have absolutely loved this year. I reread all of those. I've read those like 2 times total this year, so they're not rereads from previous years. I read them for the first time and reread them this year. Now I have been keeping up with my books owned versus books read stats. Every time I acquire a new book, I will add it to this spreadsheet. I started the year with like 125. That sounds so bad. Have I really bought 50 books this year? Probably. Who knows? Anyway, I've read 28 books off my owned TBR so far this year, which is not great. That is about 16% of my owned TBR that I've read this year. I'm definitely acquiring books at a higher rate than I am reading them, mostly because I am in my Kindle Unlimited era. And that's all I've been reading this year. I want to say hopefully this will get better by the end of the year, but I'm not holding out hope. Don't crush your fingers. Now we can take a look at the number of books that I've read each and every month. As you can see, this is all over the place. My 2 best months were January and June, and all the rest in between are just, you know, all over the place. Actually, there was a pretty steady decline from January to May, but then I shot back up in June, which is good because I was a little behind. So in January I read 20 books, in February I read 16, as well as in March I read 16, and then in April and May I read 13, and in June I read 23. So June has definitely been the best month of the year so far. Yeah, I don't know that I will be able to top June, but I'm very proud of myself for catching up. Next, let's look at my star ratings. I'm not sure what the easiest way to put this on the screen will be. I might put like the chart down here and the pie graph over here, but my largest category so far this year has been 5-star books, which is awesome. That means I'm really loving things that I'm reading. Makes me so happy. I've read 27 5-star books this year, which is 26.7%. It's just because I read that extra 1 book. If I had read like an even 100 books, this would be so nice because it would basically be the same percentage as the number of books I've read. Anyway, I digress. The next 2 categories, 4.5 and 4 stars, are honestly pretty even. I read 17 4.5-star books and 18 4-star books. Again, great. Way over half of my pie chart are books that I've rated 4 stars or higher, which is so awesome. Honestly, it's like 66% or something. Like it's like 2/3 I've rated higher than 4 star. So that's great. I'm very happy about that. And then I've rated 13 books 3.5 stars, 10 books 3 stars, 7 books 2.5 stars, 4 books 2 stars, 1 book 1.5 star, 1 book 1 star, and then I have DNF'd 3 books. I hope hopefully will start DNFing more books. This is honestly like great. Usually I only DNF like 1 or 2 books a year. So the fact that I've done 3 in the first half of the year is good. I'm getting better. We love improvement around here, but definitely not perfect. And there definitely were a couple books, especially the ones that I rated like 2, 1.5, 1 stars, that I wish I had DNF'd. We'll see if that number gets higher as we move forward in the year. And you can see down at the bottom that my average rating for the entire first half of the year is 3.9, which is great. That's really reflected in how many books I rated 4, 4.5, and 5 stars. Next, let's come over and take a look at the format of the books that I've been reading this year. As I said before, I'm in my Kindle Unlimited era, so ebooks have taken over my life. Almost 50% of the books that I have read so far this year have been ebook, which is so unusual for me. This is the first year that anything like that has happened. Ebook is usually my lowest category, but the joys of Kindle Unlimited are just unmatched, and I'm glad I finally discovered it because most of them are my 5-star books, so I'm not mad about it. But I've read 48 total ebooks, and then I have read 33 physical, which is my next highest category, and 20 books I listen to solely on audio. Sometimes I like to read along physically and listen to the audio, or like ebook and listen to the audio, and those are usually not counted in the audio category. The audiobook category is books that I like only listen to on audio. Next year I'll probably add a category that's like mixed or something to be able to track that. Next we can take a look at the audience of the books that I'm reading. By far the largest category of books that I'm reading are adult. 78% of the books that I've read so far this year have been adult, total of 79 books. I have not read any children's books. Don't know that I will. I have only read 2 middle grade books, 3 new adult books. Honestly, some of the adult books that I've read are probably new adult books, but I don't really understand the difference in the categories. And then 17 books that I've read so far this year have been YA. The next chart I think is kind of interesting is the chart that collects the data on where the books that I've read have been from. As you can see, my largest category of books that I have read have been from Kindle Unlimited. I have read 39 books from Kindle Unlimited this year, which equates to almost 42% of my total reading. My next highest category has actually been owned books, which makes me feel good. I've read 35 books that I have owned. You'll probably be like, but wait, I thought you said you read 28 books that you owned. Honestly, I don't know what the discrepancy is there. I'm very sorry. I have no idea. Maybe I marked books that I got from Audible as owned. Girl, I have no clue. I have no clue what I did. Not sure. Anyway, then I had 8 books I read from Audible. Separate categories. I don't know why I would have marked the own books as, or Audible books as own books. I have no idea what I did. 3 books though have been from Book of the Month. 9 books have been from the library. 3 books have been from NetGalley. 2 books I read via Script, and 2 books were other, which were probably just like free author download novellas. That's most likely what those other books are. And yeah, I have nothing else to say about that. The next chart we can look at is type of publication. I think this one is so interesting because this is the first year that I have started really reading like self-published and indie published books. Usually it's like 100% traditionally published. So I'm actually really happy with this. I love supporting self-published authors now, but 53 of the books that I've read so far this year have been traditionally published, which is like 52.5% of the books I've read. I read 2 books from indie presses and 46 books that were self-published. These are all my Kindle Unlimited reads for the most part. I also really think these series stats are super interesting because it's almost an even 3-way split between standalones, books from series, and companion series books. I didn't try to do that at all. That's just kind of how the cookie has crumbled. I think that's so interesting that I have equaled that out. I don't know. I've read 34 companion novels, 31 books that were part of series, and 36 books that are standalones. And that's just wild. I don't know. All right. The genres, I think I'm probably going to do the same way that I did my ratings here. So here's my lovely pie chart and my regular chart. As you can see, romance is the largest piece of the pie. 58% of the books that I've read so far this year have been romance books, 59 total. And then contemporary and fantasy are actually my next 2 biggest genres, which is so interesting, but I am part of a fantasy book club, so that is probably why the fantasy category is so large. And I usually mark YA books that have romance elements as contemporary, so that's why I have so many contemporary books. I have read 12 contemporary and 13 fantasy for 11 and 12% respectively. My next highest category is thrillers, which makes sense. I've read 8 thrillers for almost 8% of my reading. And then I have read 1 crime book, 5 graphic novels, 2 mystery, 1 sci-fi, and that's it. I also have this cool like subgenres chart that I just kind of like randomly track. The largest subgenre I have is romance. Usually if it's like contemporary as the first genre, I'll mark romance as the second genre. Some of my fantasies have probably also been romance subgenre for fantasy romance. Also have dark romances as a large category, contemporary romances as a large category, sports romances as a large category, fantasy romance as a large category. Why some are more fantasy and some are more romance, I don't know. Don't ask me. It's just in the moment what I'm thinking when I'm filling out my stupid thing. I don't know. I also have like LGBT, retellings, cozy mysteries, paranormal, historical is another decently large category. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting if you're curious. This is like a look inside my brain. It's chaotic. I don't know what's going on. Now we can take a look at some author stats. As far as author identity goes, the biggest piece of my pie, female authors that are feminine presenting and use she, her pronouns. 88 of the books I've read so far have been by authors of the sort. And then I have read 4 books by genderqueer authors, which I'm very happy about. 3 books by non-binary authors or authors that use they, them pronouns. 1 book by transgender author, and then 5 books by masculine presenting or authors that use he, him pronouns. It's just so crazy to me that of the 101 books I've read so far this year, only 5 have been by cis men. That's insane. I love myself. I do. I also have some stats on author status. I shared these in my wrap-ups as well. My largest category here is from authors that I've read before. Almost 60% of my reading have been authors that I've read before. This is because I've read a lot of series this year and like companion books that are all by the same author. Even if the author is counted in the new to me category once, all of the subsequent books I read by them are counted in the read before category. I have read lots of books by lots of different authors. I might actually go through and see who my most read authors are because I think that would be interesting. But anyway, 60 books I've read so far this year have been by authors that I have read at least one time before. 28 books are from new to me authors and 13 books were debut books. First book that author had published. So yes. All right, my most read author of the year so far is Only James. I have read 14 Only James books so far this year, which is crazy. And let's see here. I think my next highest author that I've read is Eden Finley, who I've read 8 books from, and then a close second is Saxon James, who I've read 7 books from. They co-authored a series, the CU Hockey series, so that's why I've read so many of those. I have also read 7 books from Lily Mayne. All right, and then I have also read 5 books by Colleen Hoover. So those are my most read authors of the year so far. Most of them are Kindle Unlimited authors that I have just loved, so I've read everything in their backlist, except for Colleen Hoover, which she's overhyped, hot take. But okay, now that we have reviewed all of my reading stats for the year so far, let's get into my favorite books of quarter 2. Okay, so these are my top 5 favorite books that I've read in April, May, or June. If you want to hear my top 5 from the first quarter of the year, go check out my Q1 reading stats video. I talk about those books there because these are just the top 5 for this quarter. I'm not going to tell you any kind of overall for the year so far. I talked about that a little bit in my my mid-year book freakout tag. You can check that video out too if you want to hear more about like overall favorites for the year so far, but this is just going to be quarter 2. In 5th place is a book that I read in April, and that is Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. This is a queer rom-com following Dahlia and London, who are both contestants on a cooking competition show, and they meet. It's kind of like a bad first impressions kind of vibe, and also Grumpy Sunshine. They don't necessarily like each other right away, but the more time they spend together, the more they're attracted to one another and the more they start to like each other. This book was just really fun, really sweet. I really loved the non-binary representation. The romance was hot and spicy, and I just really loved it. The cooking competition aspect was also super fun, right up my alley as a big Food Network stan. So I loved this book so much, and it's definitely one of my favorites that I've read so far this quarter. Next on my list, I'm going to put The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is a female Regency romance that I absolutely loved. It was so beautiful. This book follows Lucy and Catherine. Lucy's father has recently passed away, and this is very sad, not only because she had a close relationship with her father, but also because she worked as an astronomer directly under her father, and a lot of her work is like well renowned in the industry, despite the fact that it had her father's name on it. Because she is a woman at this time, women are not taken seriously in the sciences, but she is determined to change this for herself, really wants to make her own way in the world of astronomy. So one day she gets this letter from Catherine. Catherine is the wife of one of her father's business associates. She's writing to Lucy to apologize for her father passing and also to ask if they had any contacts for anyone who'd be able to translate this French astrological work. Lucy says, I can do that. And instead of just writing a letter back to Catherine, she thinks she will be more successful in convincing Catherine to allow her to do this job in person. So she goes to visit Catherine at her house. Catherine is pretty easy to convince, and she offers Lucy to stay at her house while she's doing the translating and to kind of help advocate for her. And thus blooms a beautiful romance between the two. I absolutely loved this book. It was so beautiful, so wonderful. Like, only a relationship between two women could be this caring and supportive and healthy and lovely. It was so, so good. If you haven't read this book, I would 100% recommend. Beautiful, immaculate, wonderful. Another book I absolutely loved this quarter was King and the Dragonflies by Case and Callender. This is a hard-hitting middle grade story following our main character, King, who has recently lost his brother. His older brother died of a sudden health complication, and this is really difficult for King to deal with. It's also very difficult because he recently lost his friend Sandy, because Sandy had come out to King, and King's brother Khalid had overheard this before he passed away and told King that he needed to stop being friends with Sandy or else other people would think King was gay as well. So King, like wanting to be accepted and loved by his older brother, did end up ending his friendship with Sandy right before Khalid passed away. And so King is dealing with a lot of grief in his life and also guilt over ending this friendship with Sandy, particularly because King is kind of starting to discover his own sexuality and realize that he might be gay as well. So he's really trying to fight this aspect of himself because he doesn't want his brother to look down on him negatively, and especially because he can't talk about this with his brother any longer because his brother is no longer there. Oh, it's just a devastating story, but it's ultimately hopeful. This absolutely wrecked me. I sobbed so hard reading this book. I loved it so much. It was so, so good. One of the best middle grades I've read in a very long time. If you've taken my recommendation and read any of Ashley Herring Blake's middle grades, this is definitely in a very similar vein. If you loved Ivy Aberdeen and Sunny St. James, you would absolutely love this book as well. Immaculate. In the number 2 spot, I'm going to put Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This book took me totally by surprise. I was not expecting to absolutely love it as much as I did, but I am so obsessed with this book and these characters. This is a sci-fi space opera following these two boys who are arranged to be married for a political alliance, Kiam and Janin. Kiam is very much like a sunshiny, bubbly character, and he's initially attracted to Janin, but Janin is very cold at the start of their relationship, and Kiam thinks that Janin is caught up on his previous husband who recently died, but this is a case of these boys just not communicating with one another. Janin has quite a few hangups, but none of them have to do with him being hung up on his previous husband. This definitely is a slow burn, but in the best possible way. The payoff is so good. I've heard a lot of people complain about this book being too slow for them, but I really loved it, and there is like a lot of political maneuvering and also a bit of a mystery involved in the story, so all of that kept me very much entertained, as well as just me sitting on the edge of my seat waiting for them to get together. I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was so much fun. It probably won't be for everyone, but it was definitely a perfect book for me, and it has led me to be obsessed now with like arranged marriages and marriage of convenience stories. This just started me down a rabbit hole, so thanks a lot, Everina, but definitely one of my favorites of the year so far. And then, of course, as a surprise to no one, probably topping my list is Moth by Lily Mayne. This is the 5th book in her Monstrous series, which is set in a post-apocalyptic America that becomes a bit of a wasteland after monsters enter in from another world and kind of wreak havoc, except many monsters actually are not out to kill humans. They're just very nice people and just want friendship and romance. So each book is a respective different couples romance set in this world. A lot of the monsters like know of each other, are friends with each other, or their human counterparts are friends with each other, know each other. It's all like interconnected. You kind of have to read it in order, but this 5th book, Moth, is by far my favorite book of the year. In this one, we're following Moth, who is half human, half monster, and Charlie, who is all human, and Moth has kind of straddled these two worlds for his entire life, not being fully accepted by either one, so he really feels very much like an outcast. So he's very cold at first when he and Charlie set off on this quest to find this leader of their camp out in the wastes. So they journey across the wastes, which is like the middle of the country where like no one really lives. It's kind of like a monster free-for-all zone. So they set off, and throughout their journey they become friends and eventually lovers, and I just really resonated with this story for some reason. I really loved both Moth and Charlie as characters. I really loved their chemistry and their dynamic, the way they work together, and I also really loved the sex scenes in this book, particularly because Charlie respects Moth's bodily autonomy so much, and it is just so hot. Like, I don't know, I've never read anything quite like this, and it was just so genuinely like sweet and such a healthy relationship, and I just loved them together, and I loved how they treated one another. I don't know. This book is just amazing. I've read it 2 times in quarter 2, so I had to put it at my #1 slot. This book is the best. I love it so much, and I want everyone to read it, but also I just want it to myself. So if you're not gonna love it, you're not allowed to read it, and I am not afraid to gatekeep that. All right, and that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. If you've made it this far, definitely let me know down below how many books you've read so far this year. I would love to know, whether it's 1 or 100. Everything is great. All readers are welcome here. I just read so much because I have a good job for reading and no other hobbies, so just keep that in mind. And yes, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, you can definitely follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Goodreads if you would like. Trying to be more active on all social media, but that never works. So, but you can follow me anyway if you would like to. Definitely also subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. I've been very good about posting 2 videos a week for the past couple of weeks. So subscribe for more and like this video if you liked it. Yes, that is all. So I will see you in the next one. Bye.